I welcome you to our daily Bible study. I am your host, Dr. Derek A. Reeves, and we will continue on in the 15th series entitled The Process of Being Spiritual. We are now on Lesson 5, Becoming Spiritual, Part 2. I want to pull up the scripture and we're going to dive right in. We only have about 10 minutes, and so I want to make the best use of this time. Romans 8 and 9. But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so be that the Spirit of God dwell in you. Now if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his. It's very interesting because here Paul, he again speaks of the state in which the nature is developed and becomes. The nature of a thing always flows out of the seed of the thing. And that's why the scripture tells us, because the seed of God remaineth, you cannot sin, not from your spirit, at least. And that's because the spirit is sealed until the day of redemption, and it is sealed with the very divine nature that we have received through so great and precious promises. Now, the soul, or the mind, and the body, that's a different thing. Always remember that sin has been condemned to operate in the flesh. Flesh is the Greek terminology, sarx, and sarx deals with the human nature that is not under the governance of the power of God or the new birth. And so he says, but you're not in the flesh. It's very important that we gain an understanding by what he means, because we still live within our humanity and we still operate in our humanity. And so here the term in, E-N, it deals with you are not upon, you are not before or in the presence of, and it deals with a sight or an estimation. And so it's a preposition that denotes a fixed position in place, time, or a state. And so he indicates then that something has happened to the state of man, and we are no longer in the state of being humanity that now is governed by the access of sin. And so what does he mean then? Because we still are encased in a physical body, we still have our souls, but the only thing that is different is the spirit. This goes back to the work of Christ on Calvary, where he destroyed the power of sin to control us. And that's why the scripture says, and let not sin therefore reign in your mortal bodies. In other words, before the new birth process, there was no spiritual continuum or no spiritual condition that could help us rise to combat the nature of sin that remained or that was within our human nature. The human nature, again, body, soul, spirit, trichotomic being. And when Adam fell into sin, not only did it shift our spiritual condition, but it shifted the totality of what we were as trichotomic beings. There is evidence within the body that the body was designed to continually repair itself. The body was designed to consistently live. But I remember years ago they did some type of research, and they found that there is a gene that seems to turn the switch off, and then the reproducing of the cells and the biological factors that were designed to keep the body and to promote the body to heal itself and to continue that healing. It's as if it switches on. Many of us who study the scripture, who study theology, we believe, and we've come to the point of understanding that this gene is the genetics that has been transferred over from Adam to all of mankind. And so we have received that gene in our humanity that flips the switch off, and that the soul now becomes decentralized in life. And even when we're born, we start moving toward the inevitable death and destruction and decay. And so he says, we are no longer in the flesh. We are not prepositionally fixed within the state of being sinful and missing the mark. What that means now is that the power of sin has been destroyed and it can no longer operate in and through our spirit. The spirit of man is sealed unto the day of redemption. However, now whatsoever is born of the flesh, according to St. John 3, Jesus says, that which is flesh, and whatsoever is born of the flesh, or sarx, is sarx. And so the only thing that remains within our nature that is yet born of the flesh or born from humanity is now our physiology and our souls. Locked within the physiology are still those receptors that receive the impulses from the senses of the body that brings to us the information that our minds remember. It took us years to come to understand patterns and to understand sensations, and for those sensations to become qualia, or understood and connected to the certain parts of physiology that cause those connections. In other words, a baby doesn't understand heat until it experiences the heat, but the qualia doesn't come into full development until the baby understands that heat can cook food, heat can keep them warm, but heat can also be destructive if misused. And so he says, you are not in the flesh. Ye are not in the flesh. You are no longer positioned totally through your trichotomic being in your humanity that is fallen, that is controlled by the ravages of sin. But you are in the Spirit. And it's very interesting because he uses again the same terminology, en, in, which means that your position has shifted. And so if the spirit of an individual can be shifted and changed and altered, it repositions them from the former position to a newer condition and position. And so before the new birth, we were totally in our humanity. We were governed by our instincts. We were governed by those issues and those senses that drove us. But since the new birth, then we are now repositioned in a greater and higher condition that emanates from a nature that is now locked within the Spirit. And so, but in the Spirit, if so be that the pneuma of God dwells in you. It's very important because when we understand that the Spirit or the pneuma of God, it is, remember, the soul is the breathing creature. Spirit is the current of air or breath. And so when we take this within its context, dealing essentially, what it means is that the soul is now reconnected to a spirit that can breathe and sustain it within the higher context of the mind, the quality, and the state of being of God. And so the Spirit can now begin to uphold. It can now begin to re-centralize. It can begin to reorient the soul or the mind. It can help the mind think within logical points of view. It can help the mind to have perceptive abilities through its emotive state. It can also cause the mind to now actively choose those things that are righteous and those things that are connected to God. And so, if so be that the Spirit of God, the breath or the actual life essence that now changes our spirit, dwells in you. The term dwell is oikeo. And the term oikeo means to dwell in, to inhabit, to live, or to cohabit. And it means to occupy a house, that is, reside, inhabit, remain, and cohabit there, which is the intermingling and the expression of love and commitment. Thayers defines it as to dwell in. And so, because the Spirit now dwells within our spirit, refashioning us, causing us to be brand new, then we are no longer governed by the old law that operates extremely and specifically from our humanity. We are out of time. I've gone a little over, but join us next time as we continue on in this study. This has been our daily Bible study, and I am your host teacher, Dr. Terry K. Reeves. God bless you.